Picture this. It's a sweltering summer evening in 1952, somewhere in rural Tennessee. Under a massive canvas tent that could house 3 circus rings, 10,000 people sway to the rhythm of hymns, while a charismatic preacher commands the stage like a maestro conducting an orchestra. The air thrums with electricity, not just from the handful of spotlights rigged above, but from something far more intangible. This is where our story begins, beneath the faded stripes of revival tents, where a revolution in American Christianity was quietly brewing. Fast forward 70 years and that humble tent has transformed into something unrecognizable. Today's megachurches aren't just places of worship. They're sprawling complexes that rival shopping malls, complete with coffee shops, bookstores, gymnasiums, and parking lots that stretch beyond the horizon. Some have annual budgets exceeding those of small nations, private jets that crisscross continents, and television networks that beam their message to millions of homes worldwide. But how did we get from sawdust floors and folding chairs to marble corridors and stadium seating? The answer lies in a hidden history that intertwines faith, ambition, technology, and an almost supernatural understanding of human psychology. This isn't just the story of religious evolution. It's a tale of American entrepreneurship dressed in Sunday's finest clothes. The transformation didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't happen by accident. It began with a realization that would forever change the landscape of American Christianity. Size matters, but spectacle matters even more. Our journey starts in the post-World War II era, when America was hungry for healing and hope. The war had ended, prosperity was on the horizon, and millions of Americans were searching for meaning in a rapidly changing world. Enter the healing evangelists, a colorful cast of characters who understood that faith, when properly packaged, could fill not just souls but also bank accounts. William Branham, a soft-spoken man from Kentucky, inadvertently became the grandfather of what we now call the megachurch movement. Branham claimed to have supernatural healing powers, and his revival meetings drew crowds that local churches had never imagined possible. But Branham's real innovation wasn't his claimed miracles. It was his understanding that bigger gatherings created more intense emotional experiences. The energy of 10,000 believers, he discovered, was exponentially more powerful than the combined faith of 10 separate congregations of 1,000. Oral Roberts, perhaps the most famous healing evangelist of his generation, took Branham's template and supercharged it with marketing genius that would make Madison Avenue executives weep with envy. Roberts didn't just hold revival meetings, he choreographed religious theater. His tent seated 12,000 people, making it larger than most professional sports venues of the time. But Roberts understood something crucial about human psychology. People don't just want to witness miracles. They want to be part of something historic. Here's where the story takes its first surprising turn. Roberts realized that the true power wasn't in the tent itself, but in what happened after people went home. He began collecting names, addresses, and most importantly, testimonials. By 1955, Roberts had compiled a mailing list of over 1 million followers, making him one of the first mega-church pastors to understand the power of direct marketing. His monthly magazine, Healing Waters, reached homes across America, creating a sense of ongoing community that transcended geographical boundaries. But Roberts faced a problem that would plague every megachurch pastor who followed him: sustainability. Revival meetings were seasonal by nature, and even the most devoted followers couldn't live on spiritual highs indefinitely. The solution came from an unexpected source: television. In 1954, Roberts made a decision that his contemporaries thought was financial suicide. He invested nearly every dollar he had into producing a television program. But this wasn't just any religious broadcast. Roberts understood that television was an intimate medium, and he adapted his message accordingly. Gone were the theatrical gestures and booming proclamations that worked so well under the big tent. Instead, Roberts looked directly into the camera as if he were sitting in viewers' living rooms, sharing coffee and conversation. The results were staggering. Within 3 years, Roberts' television ministry was generating more revenue than his tent revivals ever had. More importantly, it was creating something that had never existed before, a congregation without geographical boundaries. People in California could feel just as connected to Roberts as those who attended his meetings in person. This was the birth of the modern megachurch concept, a spiritual community united not by proximity but by shared experience and emotional connection. I'm curious about something before we dive deeper into this fascinating transformation. Where are you watching this from right now? Are you in a bustling city apartment, a quiet suburban home, or maybe even traveling? And here's what really intrigues me. What's your profession? Are you an architect who might be wondering about the engineering marvels we're about to discuss? A business person interested in the financial strategies? Or perhaps a historian like myself, fascinated by how institutions evolve? Drop a comment and let our Professor Archive community know. There's something poetic about discussing the global reach of megachurches with viewers who might be scattered across continents, connected by nothing more than curiosity and an internet connection. Now, speaking of connections, welcome back to Professor Archive, where we uncover the stories that textbooks forgot to tell. If you're finding this exploration as fascinating as I am, consider subscribing. We've got more hidden histories waiting to be discovered, and trust me, they're all as surprising as what you're hearing today. Back to our story. By the 1960s, the formula was becoming clear to a new generation of religious entrepreneurs. The key wasn't just big gatherings or television reach, it was creating an ecosystem where faith, community, and convenience intersected in ways that made leaving almost impossible. Robert Schuller, a Reformed church pastor from Iowa, looked at the exploding suburban landscape of Southern California and saw opportunity where others saw sprawl. In 1955, he rented a drive-in movie theater in Garden Grove and began holding services for families who could worship without leaving their cars. It sounds almost comical today, but Schuller understood something profound about American culture. Convenience wasn't the enemy of spirituality. It could be its greatest ally. Schuller's drive-in church might have remained a curiosity if he hadn't possessed the vision to see beyond the immediate moment. He began dreaming of a structure that would combine the intimacy of television, the spectacle of revival meetings, and the convenience of suburban living. What he built was revolutionary. The Crystal Cathedral, a glass church that cost $18 million and seated nearly 3,000 people. But here's what made Schuller's approach genuinely innovative. He didn't just build a big church, he built a destination. The Crystal Cathedral wasn't just a place to attend Sunday services. It offered tours throughout the week, hosted concerts and performances, and even featured a gift shop that sold everything from books to Crystal Cathedral branded merchandise. Schuller had accidentally invented the modern megachurch business model, diversified revenue streams that kept money flowing 7 days a week. The financial success was staggering, but the real innovation was psychological. Schuller understood that people, especially in rapidly changing suburban communities, craved stability and belonging. The Crystal Cathedral offered something that traditional churches couldn't match: the feeling of being part of something significant, permanent, and slightly exclusive. After all, not everyone could say they attended church in a building that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Yet even as Schuller was revolutionizing church architecture, other pastors were discovering that the real power lay not in buildings but in personalities. This brings us to one of the most significant but least understood figures in megachurch history: a soft-spoken pastor from South Korea named David Yonggi Cho. Cho's story reads like something out of a business school case study. In 1958, he started a church in Seoul with 5 members, meeting in a tent that leaked when it rained. By 1990, his Yoido Full Gospel Church claimed over 700,000 members, making it the largest Christian congregation in the history of the world. But Cho's numerical success wasn't what made him influential. It was his systematic approach to church growth that would be copied by megachurch pastors across the globe. Cho developed what he called the cell group system, a strategy that would seem familiar to anyone who's studied network marketing. The congregation was divided into small groups of 15 to 20 people who met in homes throughout the week. These cell groups served multiple purposes. They provided intimate community in an otherwise massive organization. They identified and trained future leaders, and most importantly, they created a multiplication system that could grow exponentially. Here's where Cho's genius becomes apparent. He realized that the biggest limitation on church growth wasn't lack of interest or inadequate facilities. It was the pastor's ability to personally connect with members. By training cell group leaders to essentially function as mini pastors, Cho could maintain personal connection with hundreds of thousands of people without ever meeting most of them individually. Each cell group leader became an extension of Cho's ministry, carrying his message, his style, and his authority into living rooms across Seoul. American megachurch pastors began making pilgrimages to Seoul to study Cho's methods, and by the 1980s, cell group systems were being implemented in megachurches across the United States. But American pastors didn't just copy Cho's system. They adapted it for a culture that was simultaneously more individualistic and more entertainment-oriented than South Korea. This cultural adaptation led to what might be the most controversial innovation in megachurch history: the prosperity gospel. While the theological implications of prosperity teaching are beyond our scope today, its business implications were revolutionary. Prosperity gospel pastors didn't just ask for donations. They positioned giving as an investment that would yield tangible returns. Kenneth Copeland, a former recording artist turned televangelist, perfected this approach in ways that would make venture capitalists envious. Copeland didn't just teach that God wanted believers to be wealthy, he presented detailed formulas for achieving wealth through faith-based giving. Donate $100, he taught, and God's laws of reciprocity would ensure a return of $1,000 or more. It was spirituality presented as a business opportunity, complete with testimonials from satisfied customers and detailed explanations of the underlying principles. The financial results were spectacular. By the 1990s, Copeland's ministry was generating over $100 million annually, funding not just a massive church complex, but also a fleet of private jets, television production facilities, and a religious university. More importantly, Copeland's approach was being copied by hundreds of smaller ministries, creating an entire economy built around the intersection of faith and financial aspiration. But the true megachurch revolution was yet to come. That revolution had a name: Rick Warren. Warren's story begins in 1980 when he and his wife moved to Orange County, California, with $100, no guaranteed income, and a vision that seemed impossibly ambitious. Warren believed he could build a church that would attract the millions of Americans who had given up on traditional Christianity without abandoning Christian theology. His target audience wasn't the faithful. It was the frustrated, the disillusioned, and the spiritually curious. Warren spent 3 months driving through Orange County neighborhoods, knocking on doors and asking a simple question: why don't you attend church? The answers he received would reshape American megachurch strategy for the next 4 decades. People didn't stay away because they disagreed with Christian beliefs. They stayed away because they found church services boring, irrelevant, and unwelcoming. Armed with this market research, Warren designed Saddleback Church to be everything that traditional churches weren't. Services featured contemporary music that sounded like what people heard on the radio. Warren himself dressed casually and spoke in conversational tones about practical issues like marriage, parenting, and career success. Most radically, Warren told his congregation that they didn't need to dress up, bring Bibles, or know anything about Christianity to be welcome. The results were unprecedented. Within 5 years, Saddleback was attracting over 2,000 people each weekend. By 1995, weekend attendance exceeded 10,000. But Warren's real innovation wasn't his casual approach or contemporary music. It was his systematic method for moving people from curious visitors to committed volunteers to financial contributors. Warren developed what he called the baseball diamond strategy. First base was attracting visitors through entertaining, non-threatening services. Second base was connecting newcomers to small groups where they could build relationships. Third base was training committed members to use their skills in volunteer ministry roles. Home plate was developing mature believers who could lead others through the same process. This wasn't accidental, it was engineered with the precision of a manufacturing process. Warren studied the characteristics of people who moved successfully from one base to the next, then designed programs specifically to facilitate those transitions. The result was a system that could reliably transform curious strangers into committed church members in a predictable time frame. But Warren's most significant contribution to megachurch methodology was his understanding of what we might call lifestyle integration. Previous megachurch pastors had focused on making church more appealing. Warren focused on making church more essential. He didn't just want people to attend Saddleback. He wanted Saddleback to become the organizing principle of their entire lives. Saddleback offered small groups for every conceivable demographic and interest: young professionals, empty nesters, recovering addicts, divorced singles, homeschooling families, motorcycle enthusiasts, and dozens of others. Members could participate in Saddleback activities 7 days a week if they chose. The church provided counseling services, job placement assistance, financial planning workshops, and even vacation opportunities. Warren had created what sociologists call a total institution, disguised as a weekend church service. The financial implications were extraordinary, but Warren was shrewd enough to understand that direct financial appeals had limitations. Instead, he focused on what he called stewardship education. Members weren't just asked to give money. They were taught that proper financial management was a spiritual discipline. Saddleback offered detailed budgeting classes, debt reduction programs, and investment workshops. The underlying message was clear: people who learned to manage money properly would naturally give more generously to the church. Warren's methods spread rapidly throughout the evangelical world, but they also attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Harvard Business School began offering case studies on Saddleback's growth strategies. Management consultants started attending Sunday services to observe Warren's leadership techniques. The megachurch had evolved beyond religious institution to become a new form of American corporation. This corporate evolution accelerated dramatically with the emergence of what we might call the CEO pastor. These weren't just spiritual leaders. They were media personalities, business executives, and brand managers rolled into one charismatic package. Joel Osteen represents the ultimate expression of this phenomenon. When Osteen inherited Lakewood Church from his father in 1999, it was already a successful megachurch with 8,000 members. But Osteen transformed Lakewood into something unprecedented: a religious entertainment empire that generated revenue streams from multiple sources while maintaining the tax-exempt status of a church. Osteen's approach was revolutionary in its simplicity. He essentially stripped Christianity of everything that mainstream Americans found objectionable. Gone were references to sin, judgment, or exclusivity. In their place, Osteen offered what he called positive faith, an upbeat, optimistic message that promised success, happiness, and prosperity to anyone willing to believe and work hard. The theological implications of Osteen's approach sparked fierce debate within Christian circles, but the business implications were undeniable. Osteen's televised services attracted millions of viewers worldwide. His books became New York Times bestsellers. His speaking engagements commanded six-figure fees. Most impressively, he convinced the city of Houston to lease him the former home of the NBA's Rockets for less than the cost of maintaining a traditional church building. The Lakewood Church Complex is worth examining in detail because it represents the current state of megachurch evolution. The facility seats 16,000 people, making it larger than many professional sports arenas. But seating capacity is only the beginning. The complex includes television production studios capable of broadcasting in high definition to global audiences, retail spaces that generate revenue throughout the week, and meeting facilities that can be rented for corporate events and private functions. Perhaps most tellingly, the facility was designed with the flexibility to host non-religious events. Lakewood regularly rents the space for concerts, conferences, and community gatherings. This isn't just practical efficiency, it's strategic brand management. Every event held at Lakewood exposes new audiences to Osteen's message and the church's culture, creating potential for future growth while generating immediate revenue. But Osteen's true innovation lies in his understanding of modern media consumption. Unlike previous megachurch pastors who adapted their message for television, Osteen developed his message specifically for digital distribution. His sermons are designed to be consumed in bite-sized segments on social media platforms. His books read like collections of motivational blog posts. His entire ministry philosophy seems engineered for an attention-deficit, smartphone-dominated culture. The financial scale of modern megachurch operations would astonish the tent revival preachers who started this movement. Lakewood Church's annual revenue exceeds $100 million, but that figure doesn't include Osteen's personal income from book sales, speaking fees, and licensing agreements. When combined with similar operations across the country, megachurches represent a multi-billion-dollar industry that rivals entertainment and professional sports in terms of revenue generation and cultural influence. Yet the most successful megachurch pastors seem to understand that their ultimate product isn't spiritual enlightenment or theological education. It's hope packaged in an accessible, entertaining format. They've discovered that people will pay generously for the feeling that their lives have meaning, their struggles have purpose, and their futures hold promise. This realization has led to what might be the next evolution in megachurch methodology: the development of what we could call spiritual lifestyle brands. Church attendance is no longer the primary or even most important connection between pastors and their followers. Instead, megachurch pastors are developing comprehensive lifestyle systems that influence how their followers think about money, relationships, career choices, and personal goals. Take Carl Lentz, the former pastor of Hillsong NYC, who became as famous for his celebrity friendships and fashion choices as for his preaching. Lentz understood that his congregation wasn't just seeking spiritual guidance, they were seeking a complete identity package that would help them navigate modern urban life. Hillsong services resembled rock concerts more than traditional church services, and Lentz himself cultivated a personal brand that combined spiritual authority with cultural coolness. The Hillsong model represents something unprecedented in religious history: a church designed specifically for people who want to be religious without appearing religious. Hillsong members could maintain their spiritual commitments while remaining fully integrated into secular cosmopolitan culture. It was Christianity for people who would never be caught dead in a traditional church, but still craved the community and meaning that religious participation provides. This brings us to perhaps the most fascinating question about megachurch evolution. Where does it go from here? The answer might surprise you. The future of megachurches isn't necessarily bigger buildings or larger congregations. It's infinite scalability through digital platforms. The COVID pandemic provided a preview of this future when churches were forced to move their services online. Many megachurch pastors discovered that their digital audiences were actually larger than their physical congregations had ever been. Stephen Furtick of Elevation Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, exemplifies this new digital-first approach. Elevation's physical campus seats 3,000 people, but Furtick's online services regularly attract over 100,000 viewers. More importantly, those viewers aren't limited by geographical proximity. Elevation has developed what amounts to a global congregation connected not by shared physical space, but by shared digital experience. The implications are staggering. A digital congregation can grow without the constraints of building capacity, parking limitations, or local economic conditions. Digital giving platforms can process donations from anywhere in the world. Online small groups can connect people across continents and time zones. We're potentially looking at the emergence of the first truly global megachurches, religious organizations with millions of adherents scattered across every inhabited continent. But this digital evolution raises profound questions about the nature of religious community itself. Is it possible to maintain genuine spiritual connection through screens and social media platforms? Can digital platforms provide the kind of deep, personal relationships that have traditionally been central to religious experience? The megachurch pastors who figure out these challenges first will likely build religious empires that dwarf anything we've seen before. The financial implications are equally mind-boggling. A global digital megachurch wouldn't be limited by local economic conditions or regional giving patterns. It could potentially tap into the religious appetites and financial resources of people in dozens of countries simultaneously. We might be looking at the emergence of the first religious organizations with annual revenues measured in billions rather than millions of dollars. Yet for all their growth and innovation, megachurches face challenges that may ultimately limit their expansion. Scandals involving financial impropriety and personal misconduct have damaged the reputations of several high-profile megachurch pastors. More fundamentally, demographic trends suggest that younger Americans are increasingly skeptical of organized religion in general, regardless of how entertainingly it's packaged. The mega-church movement also faces internal tensions that haven't been fully resolved. The success of mega-churches depends on charismatic leadership, but charismatic leaders are by definition irreplaceable. What happens when the founding pastor retires, dies, or falls from grace? Some megachurches have successfully transitioned to new leadership, but many others have split apart or declined rapidly when their founding pastor departed. There's also the question of spiritual authenticity that continues to plague megachurch leaders. Critics argue that the focus on growth, entertainment, and financial success has diluted the spiritual message to the point of meaninglessness. Supporters counter that megachurches are simply adapting eternal truths for contemporary culture. This debate isn't likely to be resolved anytime soon, but it does highlight the fundamental tension between marketing effectiveness and religious integrity that has characterized megachurch development from the beginning. Perhaps most significantly, megachurches may have succeeded too well at adapting to American consumer culture. As that culture itself becomes more fragmented and individualistic, the megachurch model of large gatherings centered around charismatic personalities may become less appealing. Younger seekers seem more interested in authentic relationships and social justice than inspirational messages and grand spectacle. This has led some megachurch pastors to experiment with what might seem like a contradiction in terms: intimate megachurches. These are large organizations that attempt to maintain the energy and resources of megachurches while providing the personal connection and authenticity that smaller communities offer. Whether this balance can be maintained remains to be seen. The story of megachurches is ultimately the story of American adaptation and innovation applied to one of humanity's oldest institutions. From Oral Roberts' healing tents to Joel Osteen's multimedia empire, megachurch pastors have consistently demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to identify what people want and figure out how to provide it at scale. They've created communities that offer belonging without judgment, purpose without sacrifice, and hope without hard questions. They've built organizations that generate enormous wealth while maintaining tax-exempt status, wield significant political influence while avoiding partisan identification, and create global reach while emphasizing personal relationships. In many ways, megachurches represent the ultimate expression of American entrepreneurial spirit. They've taken a traditional product, religion, and repackaged it using cutting-edge marketing techniques, sophisticated technology, and deep psychological insights. They've built sustainable business models that generate multiple revenue streams while serving genuine human needs for community, meaning, and hope. Yet the megachurch phenomenon also raises uncomfortable questions about the commodification of spiritual experience. When religious services are designed using the same techniques as entertainment products, when spiritual growth is measured using the same metrics as business success, and when religious leaders accumulate wealth and influence that rivals corporate executives, are we witnessing innovation or corruption? The answer probably depends on your perspective about the relationship between spiritual authenticity and institutional success. What's undeniable is that megachurches have fundamentally changed the American religious landscape in ways that will likely persist long after current controversies are forgotten. They've demonstrated that religious institutions can grow to unprecedented size without losing their essential character. They've proven that spiritual messages can be effectively communicated through mass media without being completely diluted. Most importantly, they've shown that millions of Americans hunger for religious meaning and community, even in an increasingly secular culture. The tent revival preachers of the 1950s would be amazed to see what grew from their humble canvas sanctuaries, but they'd probably also recognize the essential continuity: the same desire to connect hurting people with healing hope, the same belief that bigger gatherings create more powerful experiences, and the same confidence that the right message, properly presented, can change lives on a massive scale. Whether you view megachurches as inspiring examples of religious innovation or troubling symptoms of spiritual commercialization, their influence on American culture is undeniable. They've created new models of community organization, pioneered techniques for large-scale communication, and developed sustainable methods for funding ambitious social programs. As we move into an increasingly digital future, the megachurch movement will likely continue evolving in ways we can't yet imagine. Virtual reality churches, artificial intelligence pastoral counselors, and blockchain-based tithing systems all sound like science fiction today, but they may be standard features of tomorrow's religious landscape. The hidden history of megachurches reveals a remarkably consistent pattern. When traditional religious institutions fail to meet people's needs, entrepreneurs with spiritual vision and business savvy will create new institutions that do. This has happened repeatedly throughout American history, and it's happening again today as megachurches adapt to post-pandemic realities and digital native generations. The story that began under canvas revival tents shows no signs of ending. If anything, it seems to be accelerating as new technologies create new possibilities for religious community and spiritual connection. The next chapter in megachurch history is being written right now in studios and sanctuaries across the country by pastors who understand that the future belongs to those bold enough to reimagine what religious institution can become. That brings us to the end of today's exploration into the hidden history of megachurches. It's been a journey from humble tents to billion-dollar enterprises, from local revivals to global digital congregations. The transformation has been remarkable, controversial, and ultimately very, very American. If this deep dive into religious entrepreneurship has sparked your curiosity about other hidden histories, you know where to find us. Professor Archive is committed to uncovering the stories that shaped our world in ways most people never realized. Subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell because we've got more fascinating investigations coming your way. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and remember that the most interesting stories are usually the ones hiding in plain sight.